Welcome to another episode of Preparing for the Unexpected. I'm your host, Alex Fullick, and as always, we like to talk about things related to supply chain, business continuity, COVID, well-being, resilience, anything that helps you, your organization, or your community prepare for, respond to, and overcome adverse situations. If you'd like to be a guest on the show, please feel free. You can find me on LinkedIn. I'm the only Alex Fullick there. I'm really easy to find, and I do respond to everything I get. Alternatively, you can go to alexfullick.com, and you can reach me that way as well. And we'll see about getting you on the show or finding someone else to come on the show to talk about something you want to hear. And as a reminder, some of you may know, but please feel free, go over to YouTube for my channel, Preparing for the Unexpected, also brought to us by Stone Road. And you can see additional content that you may not hear on Voice America. Now, longtime listeners, you'll know that I talked about the BCI World Conference last year and BCI Horizons in 2021, and that my hope was I could get some of those speakers on the show to come on and talk about their topic or a different topic. Well, today is one of those days. Talking on the subject of how to improve supply chain resilience with your suppliers, I'd like to welcome to the show Zera Zheng. Zera, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Alex, for having me on the show.
My pleasure. Now, I know you and I have exchanged email and some information, but could you take a minute or two to tell us about yourself, what you do, and how you got into what you do?
Yeah, sure. Well, hello, everyone. My pleasure to be here. I'm Zera Zheng, now working in Mearsk as a head of business resilience for lead logistics. My expertise is in business resilience, continuity management, crisis management, safety, security. I've been working for more than 14 years in the logistic industries on the related jobs. I used to work for Contingency for almost 7 years in charge of internal audits, safety, security, environment, continuity management for North Asia. Then later I joined Damco. Damco is also a brand of Maersk Group. I moved to Netherlands since 2018, taking the role of global head of business resilience. I spent 18 months to build up a business resilience framework for Damco from the scratch. And I'm proud to say Damco Business Resilience received the BCI award in 2020. Yeah, thank you. And actually the same year, I joined Maersk Ocean Logistics, and I took my current role. Maersk is far much bigger than Damco, no matter the business scope and also the global presence. Maersk run its operation in more than 130 countries. And also my main job now is to develop the resilience strategies and framework, guiding the country team to manage the disruptions and providing the consultants to our customers on supply chain resilience. I like working in resilience. One of the reasons is that you always deal with different situations. Each crisis is different. And also, working on supply chain resilience in a logistic company, I'm able to connect with customers from different verticals, industries. So that's actually very challenging, to be honest, as it requires you to have some understanding of their industries, their sourcing. So it's always a push you to learn something new, but also that's why I like it. Yeah, thank you, Alex.
Well, welcome to the show. And I just wanted to say that you mentioned Maersk. And to those listening and watching, we are going to be talking about that topic. I know everybody is thinking of right off the bat, and that was that Suez Canal incident last year. So we will be touching on that. So stay tuned. So welcome again, Zera. I really appreciate your time and being here today. So let's start off. What are the elements of supply chain resilience management?
That's also a very interesting question. I will refer to the ISO 22318, the guidance on supply chain continuity. According to the ISO 22318, there are 4 key elements surrounding the operational planning and the control activities. Also, just to help the audience here to memorize these elements, then also for each element, I will use one word to sum up. So the first element, according to ISO, is a business impact analysis and a risk assessment. So this element is to learn and analyze what are the risks to business and how this could impact your supply chain. So also there are several tasks required under this element. For example, like a supply chain mapping, a business impact analysis, risk identification and assessment, and also identify the continuity requirements. But use one word to summarize, that is analysis. So that's the first element. The second element, according to ISO, is a business continuity strategy. This is more about the solutions for supply chain resilience. So after you identify the risk and impacts as described in the first element, then actually you have to come up with the solutions to mitigate the risk, monitor and manage the disruptions, and develop the continuity strategies and options. So that's why we call it the solution part. The third element is establish and implement business continuity procedures. Also, you use one word to describe execution. So this includes the implementation, training, education, and also you need to develop the assurance program to ensure you establish the procedures have been followed. This is for third elements. And for the last element is exercising and testing, or you can just briefly call it testing. So this one is to exercise the plan and test if the developed solutions is effective or not. And usually after that, you will have these, let's say, post-crisis or post-exercises review. That's procedures, that's process to help you identify what went well, what could be improved. So quickly, for just to help you memorize it, just quickly wrap up. Analysis, solution, execution, and testing. That's 4 elements.
I have a question about the business impact analysis and risk assessment. Are these the same processes that the business continuity professional performs, or is it a separate, different BIA?
Yeah, well, that's a very good question. I would say that is slightly different because we are talking about supply chain resilience, right? So the BIA and also the risk assessment is not limited to one organization, but also you have to map out the entire supply chain. So the supply chain mapping, I would say that is the biggest difference compared to the BCI standard, because the BCI standard is more focused on the business resilience. So it's the scope will be more focused on one single organization.
But can you take the BCI definition of the BIA and enhance it to incorporate the supply chain part? Can you leverage the information to help along?
Yeah. As I mentioned, that the biggest part is I would say the biggest difference is the supply chain mapping, right? Also, as I explained in the first element, the first step for the first element is do the supply chain mapping. So supply chain mapping actually is not, you won't find this in BCI standards, right? This is something very unique for the supply chain resilience. But what is the supply chain mapping? Supply chain mapping is to map out how the materials, how your resources flow, and also to identify which party are involved in the productions and the sale of the products. So in this process, the most difficult part is not just to map out your internal organization, your internal supplier, but also the external suppliers. And these external suppliers could be, have layers, have different layers. So we know that the suppliers usually can be categorized into service one and the products one, right? Service one is quite the common ones, like a logistic company like Maersk. Product ones usually is more complicated because usually there are more layers, and also the relationship between suppliers are usually more sophisticated. So also I can give you examples just to help the audience understand about these tiers of suppliers and what's the difference compared to the BCI ones. Is for examples, if we are an automotive company, and our direct, let's say the tier one suppliers could be the systems and the module suppliers, right? So we procured these system and modules from the suppliers like Continental, like Robert Bush. This is our, let's say, direct contractors, right? That's a tier one. And for these tier one supplier, for Continental and Bush, they actually need to procure the automotive chips from their chip makers, automotive chip makers. So this could be the company like NXP Semiconductors or Texas Instruments. So such kind of a company. And also for this company, for Texas Instruments, if you compare to the automotive company, they already becomes the tier two suppliers for automotive company, right? And then if you go further deeper, it's actually for these automotive chip makers, they also need to procure the chips and the wafers from the assemblers, the chip assemblers manufacturers. That could be the TSMC, SMIC. So what we heard last year is a chip shortage, right? The global chip shortage. Why it's happened? Just to think about TSMC. This is the global, the biggest chip suppliers global, and actually, this one company supply more than 50% chips globally. And also, if you talk about specific on the the chips smaller than 10 nanometers, then they actually account for 92% of a market share. So this single company, their factories are mainly in China and Taiwan. And what happens in China and Taiwan last year? We see the strict COVID lockdown happens in China, right? That's actually disrupted their manufacturing, so reduced their productivity. And also last year in Taiwan, they have major factories over there. These factories suffered the drought last year. And usually for chip manufacturing, they use a lot of water. So this drought also give a huge impact on their productions. So that's why we see the overall the productions that goes down, and also finally we see that the impact has been passing downstream and finally hit the car manufacturer. And what we saw in the news in the media is many car manufacturers and many car makers, they have to just shut down or close, stop their production line because of the chip shortage. So you see that's it's quite interesting. For the tier three suppliers, usually these are companies that they don't have the direct contract with automotive company. When they suffer these disruptions, then the impact has been passing through. So that's also why it's important, you always do the right level of a supply chain mapping. And also through this process, you can actually identify who are your critical suppliers, what are your critical materials, and what are where's your key dependency of your productions, and also to identify the business continuity requirement. So supply chain mapping, as you can see here, is kind of prerequisites for the business impact analysis. So that's, I would say, the biggest difference between the normal, the business resilience program with the supply chain resilience program.
I just have one quick question before we take a break. How do you get started on that? Because let's say Alex Fullick Incorporated and Zera Zheng Incorporated, I just receive a final product from Zera, right? Yeah. How do I go beyond that? Because a lot of times my supplier, Zera, let's say, doesn't want to tell me who her partners are because of non-disclosure agreements and some other things that get signed. And so how do you go about digging deeper to find out where all my stuff comes from? Because you're just one piece of it.
Yeah, that's actually that's a very good question, and also we see a lot of the manufacturers actually suffered from this because this issues is relevant to the information sharing, and this usually cause a lot of problems. And what we suggest for the suppliers, also for the audience, is if you want to do the supply chain resilience programs, always collaborate with your supplier, and also think about it to develop the strategy partnership with them, especially for the critical suppliers for the strategic partnership that also allows you, to establish the trust with your suppliers and also to start, share some information with each other. Usually for manufacturers, they have a material we call the bill of a material. So basically, it's a list of what elements, what kind of a material you will use in your productions. So these kind of informations that actually can help you to start identify who are your suppliers and even who are your tier 2, tier 3 suppliers. So that's is very critical as the example I just showed you, right? So yeah, that's an
Okay. Well, on that, we're going to take our first break. We're talking about how to improve supply chain resilience with your suppliers. And we're talking today with Zera Zheng, and we'll be right back. Welcome back. Today we are talking with Zera Zheng about how to improve supply chain resilience with your suppliers. Zera, lots of great information there in the first segment. I really liked what you had to say about the BIA and taking it a step further. I think that's going to be really helpful for a lot of professionals out there. Let's jump to something else you talked about, and that is contingency options and strategies. And you've got lots of information about this.
Yes, thanks, Alex. And actually, for that part, the contingency options and the strategies, I think this is also one of the most critical, but also one of the most difficult ones for the companies. Mm-hmm. So let me further explore on this part. So again, referring back to the ISO 22318, there are 4 options for contingency. The first options we call accepted status quo. So usually for supply chain resilience, you usually will face limited resources and also you have a limited time. So, but meanwhile, you got thousands of suppliers, right? So you can't really invest in the equal time to each of the suppliers. So what we do is also we can for this as a strategies is we can accept the status quo of some suppliers, especially for the non-critical one, or especially for the ones that you can easily find the replacement in the market. So that's the first options. You can just accept it. And then second options is a more interesting one. We call it the reduced the dependency or increased the resilience. There are several strategies actually under these options. The first one, we call it the multi-sourcing. So that is a use of multiple suppliers or multiple factories to supply the same products. The good things is in these different suppliers or factories can be a backup for each other, but this usually result the increasing cost as this of course against the economic of a scale, right? And also this as a complexity of a supply chain management. But this is the first options you can take, multi-sourcing one. Also, we see quite a common, especially during the COVID situations. The second one, we call increase in safety stock. This is also very common solutions. And also we see a lot happens during the COVID disruptions. The uncertainties of the supply at origin site usually will push the companies to increase their inventory at the destination site. Such usually will be in US and in Europe. And also what we see last years is actually that's also why the warehouse spaces in Europe and the US last years, is getting so tight. Almost all the warehouses in the market is, the capacity is very low. That's also the reasons, because all the companies, they see the disruptions in the supply chain. They just want to secure their supply chain. And what they do, they just increase their safety stock at the destination. That's what happened. But also when increasing these stockpiling, somehow also intensify the bullwhip effect. We know that usually if you increase the stock at the destination site, which also means you have to place more orders at the origin site. So when these cargoes are coming to your site, coming to the destination, you probably, the supply could be over the demand, over the volumes you need. So that's the bullwhip effect. And also here's a tip. Sometimes the inventory is not necessary to be something you put in your warehouses, in your facility. You can also work with your logistic suppliers to choose, for example, a longer lead time transport solution to have your inventory in transit. So that's also just more tips. I think that would be good, for someone who wants to increase the safety stock level, but not too, much on the inventory in the facility. So that could be a small tips. And the third strategies we can take is we call the diversifications of productions. This is to use regional strategies to reduce the risk. For example, garments. You can have a different series and collections produced in different countries. Could be produced in China, in Indonesia, in Bangladesh. And this is just to reduce the overall risk of the product family. So you can imagine, no matter what happens in one single country, you at least you still have some products available in shops. So that's the benefit. And the fourth strategy we call the nearshoring. This is to have the manufacturing closer to the market and regionalize your supply chain. We see this also happened during COVID time. Some companies started changing their sourcing to Eastern Europe to get their manufacturing closer to the final consumer markets, just to avoid uncertainties that happens during the long distance transportations, and also enable these companies to quickly adapt to the market change. So that's the benefit of nearshoring. The fifth strategy we called platform product or plant harmonization. So harmonization we can just simply interpret as a standardization. So this is to use the standard parts or services across a product range. The purpose is to reduce the number of SKUs, products portfolios. So this, what's the benefit of doing so? Of course, if your product can be more standardized or use a more standardized components, that will reduce the complexity in your productions. Just imagine when you have 10,000 SKU or you have a 1 million SKU, the workload could be totally different. And also we see that some that happens, just refer back to the chip shortage cases. So that's also we see last year, these car makers, because of this chip shortage, they also try to standardize their chip modules. For a car, usually they need more than 1,400 chips just in one car. So they try to cut off, because of this shortage, they try to cut off this customized component and try to use the standard chip as much as possible. That's just to simplify their production. And the last strategies we can have to increase the resilience is we call the ecosystem. This is agreeing mutual support agreements with competitors to ensure the product or services delivery to the final customer. I would say this is a more customer-oriented approach. And also sometimes this is driven by cost and it can bring mutual benefit. Some companies, usually they face a penalty scheme based on their delays of the supply. So just to avoid these huge amount of penalties or compositions, the suppliers can, even sometimes they choose to work with their competitors to ensure the orders can always be fulfilled. That's also for the ecosystem. That's for the second options. Now we move to the third option. Third options is to work with suppliers. There are several things also we can consider in this options. Is you need to develop the relationship with your critical suppliers to understand their arrangements and also try to form a partnership based on the mutual trust. That's actually also echo back to Alex, your previous questions. How we can ensure, the suppliers share us the information about their suppliers, right? That's very important. For this part, actually, we consider to work with our suppliers and develop the strategy partnership. For this part, it's important that we share the information with each other and also the knowledge as well. And also together, we aim to increase the synergies and also to work together to increase the supply chain resilience. And also for this part, when you work with your suppliers, it's better to make it clear on the performance standards and also to align the process at each side. This is also to make sure that the business continuity and the recovery target is embedded into the supplier performance review and the process. To me, this is very important.
Is that like a service level agreement that would capture something like that?
Yeah, it could be like a service agreement that you can capture that, or even you can set some KPIs or do the regular review on that.
Okay.
And also for this stage, you have to encourage your suppliers to improve their resilience. Also, I recommend, I suggested to focus on 3 areas. The first one is visibility of disruptions. You need to encourage your supplier to report and also to establish the risk monitoring scheme. They should inform you whenever something happens and hits their supply. So this is the first thing. The second area is agility in responding to the disruptions. This is the capability of the suppliers to respond to a crisis, to a disruptions. For this capability, that's including the process, including the knowledge about how to manage the situation, but also the structures. So, for example, whether they have a team to really, capable to handle these situations. And the third thing is a flexibility in backup solutions. So also you need to evaluate your suppliers, whether their solutions is good enough in terms of availability, in terms of cost or lead time. So these part of things also you need to consider when you evaluate their solutions. So that's how we can work with our supplier. The last options mentioned in the ISO is we call it the exit the relationship. So this one is usually for the critical suppliers, but these critical suppliers are reluctant, or even they are not reliable in their service or product suppliers, and also they are not, cooperative to improve their resilience at all. For such kind of suppliers, to me, it's like the time bomb in your supply chain. So the possible and the best solutions is just to remove it. But also you have to be very careful when you do so, because this is also related to the change management. Think about these suppliers are critical to your production. So better you consider maybe reduce the dependency on them year on year gradually, than just to avoid the overall impact. That's the 4 options for the contingency solution and strategies.
The last one, the option 4, accept the relationship, is that kind of a last option when you've exhausted all of those other pieces that you talked about, being flexible and agile and things like that, and if somebody still doesn't want to collaborate with you, well, then you find somebody else and say goodbye, right? Is that kind of like a last option to consider?
Yes, I would say that's definitely the last option because we definitely should consider first, try to establish the trust and the partnership with our suppliers. It should be the win-win things we look
Mhm.
first. But if they refuse to grow with you, refuse to increase their resilience with you, then yeah, probably you just also have to control your risk and try to reduce your dependence on them.
And then say goodbye.
Yeah.
So the last thing I want to talk about in this segment is something that I mentioned at the beginning that I know everyone was going to want to hear about because even I want to hear about it. Is the case study regarding the Suez Canal. Can you talk about that? Because you work for Maersk, and every time we saw the TV, the only thing we ever saw was the big ship and the name Maersk on a lot of containers. So
Yeah.
could you talk about that for us?
Yeah, sure. One more thing, the ships across the Suez Canal block is not from Maersk, so
Yeah.
but yes, this definitely impact Maersk vessel as well, right? Not only Maersk. What happens in Suez Canal? Also, just to quickly brief to the audience. So actually, there's one vessels. I don't want to mention the company name. So this vessels has blocked the Suez Canals due to the inclement weather, so the the windy conditions over there, and this caused a 6-day blockage of the canal. And this blockage has brought huge disruptions to the supply chain globally because about 12% of a global trade was affected. And also more than 300 vessels was stuck there during these 6 days. So that's the overall impact to the entire supply chain. So for Maersk, as a logistics suppliers to us, it's very important, to support our customers in their supply chain resilience. And also to we focus on three main areas when we handle the disruptions, handle the crisis. These three areas are visibility, alternative solution, and the communications. So let's talk about the visibility first. So when incident happened, you can imagine what the first things customer will want to know. Where's my cargo? And has my cargo been impacted? So that's the first questions they want to know. So to these customers, actually, they want to have the visibility of the disruptions, and also they want to know what's the impact to their shipments. For Suez Canal cases, a little bit different with the normal cases is every day there are another 50 to 80 vessels added into the queuing there, and some vessels, because they don't want to wait there, they decided to reroute around the Cape. And so basically, which means the number of the impact the cargoes are keeping change all the time. So that's
Mhm.
what happens. So to provide the better visibilities, we actually work closely with our fleet management team. As Alex mentioned, we also have our vessels stuck there, right? So we work closely with our fleet management team to get the real-time vessel status. And then based on these vessel status, we can understand that how many cargoes has been stuck there. And also based on that, we can actually keep our customers informed and also to give them the full visibility of the impact of cargoes. So the visibility is important to customers. And also that's how we resolve this for our customer. Second part, regarding alternative solutions. So when we manage the crisis in Maersk, we actually engage the different product owners, or you can say the business unit owners, and also our commercial peoples to analyze the impact and jointly develop the alternative solutions together for the Suez Canal cases. So we created the solutions based on we call them the likely scenarios and the worst scenarios. So if the blockage continues, because when it's happened, you don't know how long it will, get blocked, right? At the beginning, they said, probably waiting for another week or maybe 3 days. So it's a lot of uncertainty. So actually, that's also why we developed the two different scenarios. So if the blockade continues, which means all vessels have to reroute around the Cape because the vessel cannot just keep waiting there for a month, right? So that's at least additional 10 days for Asia to Europe trade lane. And also this means additional 22 days for Middle East to Mediterranean trade lane. So you can understand how this impacted the trade lanes, how this impacted the business. And given that impact, we need to prepare the options to our customer for sure. And especially these customers, some customers are sensitive to the lead time. So for example, the options we offer to them, like Maersk Rail, what we call the A18s, A19 services, that's that's a intercontinental rail services from Asia to Europe directly through the intercontinental rail solutions. That's one option. And also we offer the sea air solutions using some of our Maersk hubs. So it's more about starting with the ocean transportation, then to some countries using our own air hubs to continue the journeys and continue move the cargoes by air. So this is also another solutions we offer to them. Just to give some examples. These actually support our customers to mitigate the impacts to their cargoes as much as possible. And also as suppliers, when your products or services are impacted, you definitely need to come up with this backup solution. This is critical to any companies, just to ensure that your customers' supply chain resilience. And the third areas is on communications. Timely and effective communications over the disruptions is very important, as this is to ensure you as suppliers can always keep your customers get the necessary information they want for their disruption handling. So for Maersk cases, apart from twice a day vessel updates, we also engage our communication and the customer service team together to collect the customer feedback and the questions. Our communication team actually, based on the customer feedback, to analyze the customer feedback and to try to understand what topics our customers are interested about. And then they try to make sure the topic will be covered and answered in the next update as far as possible. So you can see that we always keep tracking the customer feedback, then make sure that our customers' concern can be answered, can be covered. So that's how Maersk do the communication. And also that's quite interesting. If you go to the Maersk website, you will find, especially if you search Suez Canal, and then you will get more information how we do especially the customer communication. You will find that for Suez Canal cases, we even have some videos explaining about what's the strategy, how we make the decision, to reroute some vessels around the Cape things. So because this is based on the customer feedbacks, and they interested to know that why this vessels is change the route to go through the Cape, why this vessel is still keeping waiting there. So this is based on the customer interest. This is how Maersk in general reacts to the Suez Canal, and also we as suppliers, actually we definitely need to support our customers in supply chain resilience, and especially for such kind of a global crisis. What we can do and actually can help our customers to really mitigate the impacts. So yeah, that's a story.
That must have been difficult with the communications, because when I'm envisioning the ships involved, they have hundreds of containers. So there's got to be hundreds of customers that you're trying to communicate with. That had to have been the challenge in itself that there were so many
Yeah.
different people to deal with.
Yeah, exactly. So actually, what do let's say this, the most company, when we talk about the crisis communication, they will think about we should issue the customer anniversary, we should issue the customer letters, right? And put this on their website. That was the normal practice. But actually, also I have to say, don't take for granted that a customer will go to your website to look at it.
Mm.
In most cases they won't, even they go to it, maybe another timely manners. So what we also suggest our customer service team is, don't take it for granted when the customer anniversary is released, it's released, but also better you just to give up a follow-up call to our customers, especially to the local customer, to make them aware that what's the latest situations, or at least to make them aware there's a latest updates of the customer anniversary available on the website. So that's what we can do. And also for Maersk, I would say, thanks to the digitalizations and these technology things, we do use these the CRM system, the customer relationship systems, and also some other technology to ensure that the impact the customers could be will be able to receive these updates, these cargo information in a timely manner. That's also helps a lot.
Great. I was so glad to hear about the Suez Canal piece and everything that happened with that. And I know listeners probably wanted to hear that as well. So thank you so much for sharing all of that. We've come to the end of our second segment. We are talking with Zera Zheng today on how to improve supply chain resilience with your suppliers, and we'll be right back. Welcome back. We are talking about supply chain resilience management with Zera Zheng. Zera, earlier on you talked about collaboration. So why is collaboration so important with supply chain resilience management?
Supply chain itself is not working, right? It's internally with a different department. It could be your sourcing department, a planning department, a manufacturing, sales, and marketing. And also externally, like what I mentioned earlier, you have to work with your suppliers. So supply chain in general is not working with the different functions and the different organizations. In case something happens, the impacts also I shared earlier is the impacts can pass through the supply chain and finally hit you. That's the cases I shared about the chip shortage. So it's important that we can collaborate with the different functions and different organizations alongside these supply chains. Then we can allow ourselves to receive these early warnings and to develop the capability to detect what has happened. So that's why it's in collaborations is important. And in general, I would say supply chain resilience is a teamwork. You can never ever achieve it by yourself. You always have to work with other functions and also always need to work with your suppliers. So that's why collaboration is important.
And if you don't collaborate, it's going to come back to bite you in the end if something happens.
Exactly.
And if it happens anywhere along that supply chain.
Yeah.
Right. So now I wanted to bring something up. You do something on LinkedIn. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, thank you, Alex. I actually, I'm passionate, as you can see, I'm passionate about these supply chain resilience things. And also because of my role, I always keep following different medias, also the different channels to keep an eye on the risks and the disruptions that might affect the supply chain. So what I have done on LinkedIn is every Saturday, usually CET time or morning time. So I will post the top 5 weekly supply chain risks on my LinkedIn account. And also, actually, I find that this could be benefit the people, especially working on supply chain. So if you are interested, also welcome to follow me there.
Well, tell you what, send me the link to
Yes.
where people can go, your link, and I'll include that in the episode description so that people have that link, and then they can follow you and see what you have to say each week, and hopefully help themselves with their own supply chain issues.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Alex.
You're welcome. Now, we still have about 2 minutes left. Do you have any final thoughts that you'd like to convey regarding supply chain resilience management?
Yes, the final things is I want to say supply chain resilience is super important because we are operating our business in an ever-changing world. As you know, this as a full of uncertainties and disruptions. So remember, no matter how attractive your product is, if you fail to deliver it to your customers, then all the efforts is just a waste, right? So, but on the other way around, if the product is maybe even not so competitive, but if you can always deliver to your customers, and you actually buy yourself a chance, especially when your competitors make a mistake and fail to deliver it, right? So the supply chain resilience is fundamentals. So please invest your time, your also your resources on your supply chain resilience capability build up, and also to try to develop your resilience muscles and also your team. This is a battle of a survival, to be honest, for the companies. So that's why I think the topic itself, the supply chain resilience, is super critical for the business that are operating nowadays. That's my last word for this. Yeah.
Well, great. On that note, we've come to the end of the show. Zera, thank you so much for sharing your expertise and your time with us today. I really appreciate it.
Pleasure.
And you mentioned, you are passionate about supply chain, and obviously I could see that. It definitely came through. We could tell you're very passionate about supply chain resilience management. So, and sharing your experience with the Suez Canal. I'm sure a lot of people will be interested in listening to that piece again. So thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And to everybody watching and listening, stay prepared, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
If you liked that video, thumbs up. If you didn't like that video, thumbs down. But leave a message and let me know what your thoughts are. If you'd like to be a guest on the show to talk about something related to business continuity, disaster management, COVID, personal well-being, anything that's relatable to those subjects, you can reach me through my LinkedIn profile, which is in the video description. And of course, don't forget to subscribe. In the meantime, stay prepared, everybody.